It's a car. It's a truck.
It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's Superman.
No, it's the 2024 Hyundai Santa Cruz. And this is what Hyundai is calling their SAV, a sport activity vehicle. And even though this is all marketing and they just made that term up, we're here to find out if this thing is actually any good. And we're going to do that by taking a look outside, inside. I'm going to show you some of the features, technology, and drivetrain of this vehicle. We're going to try and throw a bike in the back to see how usable it is. And then last but not least, we're going to take it on the road to see what it's like to drive. And I'll give you my suggestion for which one I would buy. Starting first with the exterior, we certainly have to applaud Hyundai for doing something different here. While this is by no means the first car truck thing, you have things like the Honda Ridgeline or the Ford Maverick. But even amongst that segment of car trucks, this thing looks different. It has its own character to it. And I think maybe, at least in this model, it's in part to the sage green color, which is really cool. Also, the front end with all the triangles and the integrated lights in the grille is actually really cool. So the overall shape, while it is this sport activity vehicle, according to Hyundai, is quite unique. And I think ultimately that's a big reason why you would want to buy this. It's not a RAV4, it's not a CRV, it's not something that you see everywhere. So it's for someone who wants to stand out a little bit. The Santa Cruz is offered with two engine options. In the lower trims, you get a 2.5 liter naturally aspirated engine, and in the upper trims, like this XRT, you get a 2.5 liter turbocharged engine. This engine is good for 281 horsepower and 311 pound-feet of torque. It's actually a really powerful motor, and as you're going to see, moves this thing quite well on the drive. Now, for fuel economy, it's not the greatest, frankly. 19 city, 27 highway. It's also worth noting that this is the all-wheel drive model. You can get this in a front-wheel drive model or all-wheel drive model. And also worth noting that the base cars get a traditional 8-speed transmission, no CVT, which is nice. And then this, the 2.5 liter turbo, gets a 8-speed dual clutch transmission. We'll be curious to see what that's like out on the drive. Four wheels and tires, you're getting anywhere from 18s to 20s, depending on which model you get. Here with this XRT model, we have 18s in this sort of polished aluminum and black look, which look great. Not sold on these red center caps though. It just sort of clashes with the rest of the car in my opinion. There's no other red accents to speak of. But besides that, these are wrapped in Kumho Krugen tires, or Krugen depending on how you pronounce it, 245 60 18. Nice meaty sidewall, so that's good. Although I will say, of course, it's a Korean auto manufacturer, Hyundai, and it makes sense that they're putting Korean tires on here, but the tires tell you really all you need to know about this vehicle. These are just passenger tires, not off-road, not all-terrain or anything like that. So while this vehicle does have some aspirations for light off-roading, it's really meant just to be driven on the road. The interior characteristics of the Santa Cruz largely match the exterior characteristics in the sense of it's different, but that's mostly in a good way. Let's start with this dash layout and just sort of interior layout in general. Most cars that I get in these days, they just take a screen, they stick it on the top of the dash, it looks like an afterthought. And this is in stark contrast to that. It's a screen that's integrated and also tilted towards you, so it just feels like they put some thought into how this interior was designed, which not only gives you the benefit of a more usable screen, but you also get some really excellent visibility out the front. It feels very airy in the front here. There's no screen sticking up that is sort of partially blocking your view. So lots of benefits there. And the screen itself has great color to it. It's a great resolution. It's quick to respond. So it's all the things that you really want in an infotainment screen. The only knock I could say is that the HVAC controls below it are capacitive touch. So you don't get physical buttons. It just makes it kind of hard sometimes when you're driving to make sure you're hitting the right button or you're even hitting the button at all. It's just easy to sort of misclick on here. At least the HVAC controls are always here. It's not like they're buried in a menu structure. So that's at least okay. As well as the heated seats, you do get a physical button for that. How about the rest of this interior? Well, you get a digital display for the gauge cluster, and it's customizable. You can change the look and feel of it. Pretty straightforward. Rev counter and speedometer. Steering wheel has very straightforward controls, and crucially, there is a way to adjust the volume on the steering wheel with a physical toggle switch, which is important because they have removed the physical volume knob on the infotainment, which is sort of a bummer. I just don't like using on the steering wheel because it takes longer to sort of get to where you want as opposed to just turning a dial. But my personal preference, maybe most people wouldn't be bothered by that. Materials in here are a bit of a mixed bag. There are some low points like these window switches, which look like they are out of a 1995 Hyundai product, just really cheap plastic. Some of this other stuff though, I mean, the steering wheel feels nice. You do get piano gloss black plastic on the infotainment screen, which is obviously going to get dirty. The seats themselves are okay. They're totally fine. Nothing terribly interesting to write home about. Relatively comfortable. They do at least have lumbar support, which is good. That's the front seats. Now the back seats is another thing I have a problem with. That's because I can't sit behind myself at 6'1". There's just not enough leg room. And in something that's this like car, truck, SUV thing, I would expect more room. Headroom is okay, but the other issue is the uprightness of the seat backing back there. In order for them to sort of make all this packaging work, it's of course not adjustable, and it's also very upright. So it's just uncomfortable to sit back there for an adult. Maybe it would be okay for children, but if you're actually going to move adult human beings around, it might not be the best option. But with all that said, the interior design overall is quite good. Let's throw a bike in the back to see how usable or not that truck bed is. Before we get to the bike test, it's worth showing how the back bed of the Santa Cruz works. The bed itself is just over 4 feet long, and it's covered with a roll-up tonneau style cover. It operates with a simple latch and has a lock underneath if you want to secure things inside. 4 feet is very short for a bed. As you can see, it's not able to fit my skis even diagonally in the bed. That's a shame, since part of the appeal of this vehicle is to store your outdoor stuff back there. But if you can't fit something without it sticking out, you certainly can't lock it. For reference, I'm 6'1", so my skis may be a bit longer than most, but it's something to keep in mind. I am able to fit my 29er mountain bike in the back no problem, but it's worth noting that you probably can't fit more than one bike back there. As always, if you enjoy the bike test, make sure you're hitting the subscribe button and leaving a comment below so you don't miss future videos. All right, taking the Hyundai Santa Cruz for a drive. What is this vehicle's biggest asset? What trait is this vehicle's biggest asset? I'm gonna have to go with the fact that even though it is this truck utility lifestyle thing, it just drives like a car. And that is important because, let's be honest, no one who has an existing truck is converting to this, right? Like, I say no one, a very small amount of people that have an existing truck are going to buy something like this. It's just not that demographic of people that are going to buy this. The kind of people that are going to buy this realistically are people in Subarus, people in RAV4s, people in CRVs that want something different, right? And in that sense, this drives like all of those. It drives like those small CUVs, it drives like a car, it's very nimble, it drives smaller than it is. Overall, it has pretty good visibility, although the back is lacking, admittedly. The rear 3/4 with the way it's designed is not ideal. And then out of the back, obviously, it's like such a narrow window. Thankfully, you have a good backup camera, but that's probably my biggest complaint about how it drives, is that the visibility in the back isn't so good, but it's so nimble and it changes direction well and just acts like a car. And like I said, that's realistically what you want out of this. We just went over that speed bump there, and the other part that's really good about this vehicle is the suspension. Very soft, not too soft, but very soft enough to soak up all your bumps and not cause you any issues there. But it also has a good body control to it. It doesn't sort of wallow about. It still handles pretty well. Of course, if you push it too fast in the corner, it understeers, but nobody is canyon carving in this thing. They're driving it just like a regular vehicle. And that leads me to sort of the next interesting part about this car is the engine itself. So this is the 2.5 liter turbocharged engine, and it's actually really fast for what it is. 311 torque, and while there is a little bit of turbo lag, it takes a little bit for this engine to kind of spool up and come on boil. When it does, you got to hold on. And I think it's just sort of an expectation thing. You don't expect this thing to be fast, so when it is relatively quick, you're kind of like, whoa, that's a lot of power. And I'll demonstrate that here on this on-ramp. I mean, we're already at 60 miles an hour. Like, it's surprisingly fast. So makes good power and torque. The fuel economy is not the best. At 22 miles per gallon combined, that's a bit of a bummer, but a lot of other CUVs and Subarus aren't necessarily known for getting the best fuel economy, but certainly they're typically better than this. So this engine is quite interesting, and it's coupled with this dual clutch DCT transmission. So dual clutch transmission, which is a fancy way of saying it's a little more high tech and should have faster shifts and things like that, and it does. But don't think, if you've ever been in a Volkswagen or an Audi that have DSG transmissions, their brand of transmission is so quick shifting and snappy. This is good, but it's nowhere near that. It feels to me more like a traditional transmission. Like, if you didn't tell me that this is a dual clutch, I would just think, oh, this is a 8-speed automatic traditional transmission, but a pretty good one. So the dual clutch in some ways is sort of lost on this vehicle. What is not lost on this vehicle though is the all-wheel drive. We're gonna get towards the end into which one I would recommend to people, which model, which version you should buy. But the all-wheel drive one, at least with this turbocharged engine, is a must, because if you were to put all this power through the front wheels, it would absolutely blow the tires off. So the all-wheel drive is excellent. It makes it very predictable. It puts the power down super well. And of course, we talked about potentially understeering if you push it too hard, but overall, it just really puts the power down and is very competent. Outside of that, I think that now is a good time to get into which one I think I would buy. Personally, I would recommend going with a lower tier model. While this car does have a lot of power, unless you're somebody who really wants and uses that horsepower all the time, it's sort of just wasted on this vehicle. I mean, once again, this is not a canyon carver. This is not something that you're racing people in. It's a utility vehicle. You might take it on a dirt road and things like that, but why would you want to push it with this like turbocharged engine? Just get the NA engine. I don't think it's going to be super lacking in power. You'll get the traditional transmission with that one. Once again, you're not missing out on the dual clutch with this. It's nothing special. And then just get that in all-wheel drive, and then you would have a nice little utilitarian vehicle that gets a little better fuel economy than this, being that it has a little less power. And you save a lot of money, because this is a $40,000 vehicle. My voice cracked at the end of that. $40,000 is a lot of money. In some ways, like a reasonable value, but I think when you get this closer to 30, this starts at around 26, 27, but realistically optioned, you're probably at around 30. That seems to start to feel like more of a value. If you're somebody who is coming from a Subaru and you want something a little different, and you really value sort of that truck space in the back where you can throw your skis in, throw your bike in, and you don't have to worry about getting it dirty, you can just hose it down, it starts to become a really compelling argument, because it drives really well like a car, and I think overall this infotainment is fairly good, and it's a unique experience, and some people want that, some people value that. So if you're into that kind of thing, I think you would enjoy this at a cheaper price point. That's really my biggest takeaway. Naturally aspirated lower tier with all-wheel drive. save about 10 grand, and get more or less the same experience. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you made it this far in the video, I appreciate it very much. Consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.